Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship, looking out at the amazing sight before him. Hundreds of alien ships floated in perfect lines across the dark space around Earth. Each ship looked like it came from a dream with smooth metal. Hulls that shined like mirrors and strange glowing lights that pulsed in colors he had never seen before. Some ships looked like giant crystals that bent light in impossible ways. Others had hulls that seemed to flow like liquid metal, even though they were completely solid. The alien ships were beautiful and scary at the same time. Jake's own ship, called the Defiant, looked like a piece of junk next to these amazing vessels. The Defiant had started life as a cargo hauler back when humans first began building colonies on distant planets. Her hull was covered in patches and dents from years of hard work carrying supplies between worlds. The metal was stained and rusty. In places, pipes and cables ran along the outside where they had been headed over the years. She looked like someone had built her from spare parts found in a junkyard. The other ships in the Galactic Council fleet treated the Defiant like she was barely worth noticing. When alien captains sent messages, they spoke to Jake like he was a child who had wandered into an adult meeting by mistake. They called his ship names like Rust Bucket and Flying Scrap Pile. Some of them laughed when they saw the Defiant trying to keep up with their perfect formations. Commander Lisa Hayes worked at the weapon controls on the bridge. She looked at the screen, showing their guns, and shook her head. 2 small pulse cannons that could barely dent a decent asteroid. 1 torpedo tube that could only fire basic explosives. A few mining charges they had changed to work as bombs. The whole weapon system was worth less than the paint job on most alien ships. The Galactic Council had made it very clear what they thought of humans. Earth had only been discovered by alien scouts 5 years ago. A council had decided that humans were too new and too simple to be a real threat to anyone. They gave humanity the smallest possible fleet and put them in the back of every formation. Most alien species thought humans were like children playing with toys. Lieutenant Sam Parker kept the old fusion reactor running in the engine room. The reactor was older than Jake and made strange noises that would scare most engineers. Sam had to hit it with a wrench twice a day to keep it working right. The whole ship shook and rattled every time they changed course. Alien ships nearby would send messages asking if the humans needed a tow back to their home planet. But Jake had learned something important during his 20 years flying cargo ships between the colonies. He had learned that the best ships were not always the prettiest ones. The Defiant might look terrible, but she had something the alien ships did not have. She had been built by humans who knew how to survive in places where everything wanted to kill you. Jake remembered his first flight to the mining colony on Titan VII. The planet had storms that could strip the paint off a ship and radiation that could cook a crew in minutes. The fancy ships from Earth's main fleet could not handle conditions like that. Only the tough old cargo haulers could make the trip safely. The Defiant had made that run 100 times without losing a single crew member. The bridge crew worked quietly around Jake as he watched the alien fleet. Everyone knew their job and did it without being told. Lisa kept track of all the other ships and made sure the Defiant stayed in position. Sam watched the engine readings and fixed problems before they got serious. The rest of the crew of 43 humans worked together like parts of the same machine. Jake had picked his crew carefully over the years. He wanted people who could think fast and fix problems with whatever tools they had. Most of them had worked on mining ships or colony transports before joining the Defense Force. They were used to making old equipment work better than it was supposed to. They knew how to turn basic tools into whatever they needed to survive. The alien crews were different. They had been trained on perfect ships with perfect equipment. When something broke, they called for support ships to bring new parts. When they faced a problem, they had not seen before they waited for orders from their commanders. They had never learned to make things work with tape and spare wire like humans did. Jake walked around the bridge, checking on his people. The Defiant might be the ugliest ship in the fleet, but her crew was solid. Lisa had worked asteroid defense platforms, where one mistake meant everyone died. Sam had kept mining ships running in places where the nearest repair dock was 6 months away. Every person on the ship knew how to stay alive when everything went wrong. Outside the window, the alien ships continued their perfect parade. The Zephyrian cruisers moved like dancers, with every turn planned to look beautiful. The Nexus Coalition ships changed colors as they flew, creating patterns in space like living rainbows. The other alien vessels showed off their advanced technology with displays that amazed anyone watching. The Defiant just flew in a straight line like she always had. Her engines made their usual grinding noise. Her hull creaked and groaned from the stress of space travel. She looked like she might fall apart at any moment. The alien crews probably thought the humans were one system failure away from disaster. Jake smiled as he watched a group of Zephyrian fighters practice fancy flying maneuvers near his ship. They twisted and spun through space in perfect formation, showing off their incredible speed and control. One of them flew close enough to the Defiant that Jake could see the pilot inside. The alien looked at the human ship with obvious disgust before speeding away to rejoin his squadron. The truth was that Jake and his crew were exactly where they wanted to be. Let the aliens think humans were weak and stupid. Let them believe the Defiant was just a flying piece of junk that barely deserved to be in the same space as their perfect war machines. Jake had been underestimated before, and he knew how useful that could be when things got serious. The Defiant had secrets that no alien scanner could detect. She had been rebuilt in ways that did not show from the outside. Her crew knew tricks that were not taught in any military academy. When the time came to prove what humans could really do, Jake was ready to show the galaxy something they would never forget. The warning alarms screamed through every ship in the Galactic Council fleet as space itself seemed to tear open at the edge of the solar system. Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as he watched the massive enemy fleet pour out of hyperspace. Like angry hornets from a broken nest, 300 ships of the hegemony Armada appeared in perfect attack formation with their black hulls, absorbing light and making them look like holes cut out of space itself. Each hegemony ship was over 1 kilometer long and bristled with weapons that could crack planets in half. Their hulls were covered in spikes and sharp edges that made them look like giant space monsters. Red lights pulsed along their sides like glowing veins. The lead ship was twice as big as the others and had guns that looked like they could destroy a moon with one shot. Admiral Zektar's voice boomed across all communication channels, speaking in the harsh language of the hegemony before switching to Galactic Common. His words were cold and full of hate as he announced that the Council fleet had exactly 10 minutes to surrender before he would destroy every ship and claim Earth as his new base of operations. The beautiful alien ships that had looked so perfect just moments before now scrambled to form defensive lines. Zephyrian cruisers powered up their plasma weapons while their hulls glowed bright blue from the energy buildup. Nexus Coalition ships began charging their quantum disruptors until their crystal hulls rang like bells. Every species in the Council fleet prepared for the fight of their lives against an enemy that had never been defeated. Jake watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet spread out to surround the Council forces. The hegemony had been planning this attack for months, and they knew exactly how to position their ships for maximum damage. They had studied every battle the Council had ever fought and learned how to counter every tactic the alien species might use. Commander Lisa Hayes worked frantically at her station, trying to coordinate with the other ships in the fleet. The alien commanders were shouting orders in 12 different languages, while their ships moved in patterns that made no sense. Some species wanted to charge straight at the enemy, while others wanted to retreat to a better position. The Council fleet had never trained together as one unit, and it showed in every confused movement. Lieutenant Sam Parker made final adjustments to systems that did not appear on any official ship blueprint. These were modifications that had been built in secret human shipyards, using technology that looked simple, but was actually more advanced than anything the aliens had ever seen. The changes had been made to look like routine maintenance, so no Council inspector would ask questions about them. The Defiant moved away from the main battle formation and positioned itself behind a cluster of small asteroids. To any observer, it looked like the human ship was trying to hide from the coming fight. The alien crews probably thought the humans were too scared to face real combat and were looking for a place to surrender. When the battle was over, Jake opened a private channel to his crew and spoke in a calm voice that did not match the chaos happening around them. He told them that everything they had trained for over the past 5 years was about to be tested. The modifications they had made to their ship and the tactics they had practiced in secret were about to be put to use against the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks show. Massive energy beams cut through the darkness, while exotic matter torpedoes exploded in flowers of destruction. The hegemony ships advanced in perfect order while their guns tore holes in the Council formation. Within minutes, it became clear that the alien defenders were badly outmatched and outgunned. Ship after ship began to fall as the superior hegemony vessels pressed their attack. A Zephyrian cruiser exploded in a ball of blue flame when hegemony missiles penetrated its shields. A Nexus Coalition dreadnought broke in half when enemy plasma beams melted through its crystal hull. The beautiful ships that had looked so impressive before were being destroyed like toys. Jake watched the slaughter with cold eyes while his crew prepared their ship for what was coming next. The Defiant might look like a piece of junk, but she had been rebuilt from the inside out with human ingenuity and determination. Every system had been improved using lessons learned from decades of survival in the harshest environments humans had ever faced. Engineer Parker checked the readings on his modified Reactor 1 last time. The fusion drive had been rebuilt using mining equipment that was designed to work in places where failure meant instant death. The power output was 3 times higher than the original specifications, and the whole system could run for days without maintenance. No alien engineer would believe such performance was possible from such old technology. The battle continued to rage as more Council ships were destroyed or disabled. The hegemony fleet moved forward like a pack of predators hunting wounded prey. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination, while their shields deflected every counterattack the defenders could manage. Admiral Ziktar broadcast another message demanding immediate surrender from all remaining ships. Jake listened to the alien commanders begging for reinforcements that would never come. The Council had put their faith in superior technology and perfect formations, but they had never learned how to fight dirty when their backs were against the wall. They were about to lose everything because they had never faced an enemy that was willing to do whatever it took to win. The time had come for the Fee Defiant to show the galaxy what humans had really learned during their short time among the stars. Jake gave the order that would change everything, and his crew responded with the precision of people who had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. The Rust Bucket was about to become the most important ship in galactic history. Jake Morrison took a deep breath and pressed the communication button that connected him to every station on his ship. His voice was steady and calm as he spoke the words his crew had been waiting to hear for 5 long years. He told them it was time to show the galaxy what humans could really do when their backs were against the wall and everything they cared about was in danger. Defiant broke away from the asteroid cluster where it had been hiding and began accelerating toward The enemy formation had a speed that should have been impossible for such an old cargo ship. The fusion drive that Sam Parker had rebuilt using mining equipment roared to life with a power output that made the whole ship vibrate like a tuning fork. Alien sensors detected the energy signature and registered readings that their computers marked as impossible. What the council species did not understand was that humans had spent decades building equipment that could work in the most dangerous places in the galaxy. The asteroid mining colonies where Sam had learned his trade were places where reactor failure meant everyone died in seconds. The equipment had to work perfectly every single time, or entire crews would be lost in the cold vacuum of space. Commander Lisa Hayes activated systems throughout the ship that had been carefully hidden from alien inspectors for years. The hull plating that looked like old corroded metal was actually a revolutionary material that human engineers had developed for deep space construction work. It could absorb energy from enemy weapons and spread the heat across the entire surface, so no single spot would fail under fire. The metamaterial hull had been tested in the solar forges near Mercury, where temperatures could melt most known metals in seconds. It had been used to build structures that could survive in the hearts of gas, giant storms where the pressure could crush mountains. The aliens had no idea that the rusty-looking exterior of the Defiant was actually the most advanced armor ever created. Jake watched the tactical display as his ship closed the distance to the lead hegemony dreadnought. The massive enemy vessel was 3 times longer than the Defiant and carried enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Its black hull was covered in weapon ports that glowed red as they prepared to fire. Admiral Zektar himself commanded that ship and had never lost a battle in 30 years of conquest. The enemy fleet noticed the approaching human ship, and several smaller vessels turned their guns toward what they assumed was a desperate suicide attack. Plasma beams and particle cannons fired at the Defiant from multiple directions, but the energy simply vanished into the metamaterial hull without causing any visible damage. The alien gunners increased their fire rate, thinking their weapons were malfunctioning. Lisa Hayes targeted the lead dreadnought with what appeared to be their single torpedo tube, but pressed a sequence of buttons that activated hidden launch systems throughout the ship. The Defiant had been rebuilt with missile tubes concealed inside modified cargo bays that looked like empty storage spaces to any external scan. 12 guided missiles launched simultaneously from positions all over the hull. Each missile contained technology that would have seemed impossible to alien military engineers. Instead of antimatter warheads or exotic energy weapons, the missiles were filled with billions of microscopic machines that had been designed for asteroid mining operations. The nanobots were programmed to break down any material they encountered and use it to build more copies of themselves. The mining nanobots had been created to help humans harvest resources from the most difficult locations in space. They could work in absolute zero temperatures or in the nuclear fire of stellar coronas. They could consume solid rock or process the strangest alien metals that prospectors found in distant systems. Nothing could stop them once they began their programmed task of breaking down matter. Admiral Zektar watched in confusion as the human missiles struck his flagship and seemed to do no damage at all. The small explosions barely scratched his mighty ship's armor, and he laughed at what he thought was a pathetic final gesture from the primitive human vessel. He ordered his gunners to destroy the Defiant quickly so they could return to the important business of conquering Earth. But something strange began happening to the dreadnought's hull where the missiles had struck. Small patches of metal started to change color and texture as the nanobots spread through the ship's structure. The microscopic machines followed programming that told them to consume any material that contained certain elements and build more nanobots from the resulting raw materials. The hegemony ship's armor was made from the finest metals their scientists could create, but the nanobots treated it like food. They spread through the hull following power conduits and structural supports, while they reproduced at an exponential rate. Within minutes, billions of machines had become trillions, and they were consuming the dreadnought from the inside out. Jake opened a communication channel to the remaining council ships and warned them to pull back to a safe distance. His voice carried an authority that made alien commanders obey without question, even though they did not understand what was happening. The human captain spoke like someone who knew exactly what destruction he had just unleashed. Sam Parker monitored the nanobots' progress from his engineering station while making sure their ship stayed clear of the spreading effect. The machines were designed with specific target recognition. They would only attack materials matching hegemony ship construction. They would ignore council vessels and human technology, but anything built by the enemy would be consumed down to the molecular level. Admiral Zektar's dreadnought began to come apart as critical systems failed throughout the massive ship. The nanobots had reached the reactor core and were breaking down the containment systems that held the ship's power source stable. Emergency alarms wailed through the corridors as crew members realized their mighty vessel was being destroyed by an Endento enemy too small to see and too numerous to fight. What happened next would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned to fear human creativity and ingenuity more than any weapon ever built. The nanobots that had started consuming Admiral Zektar's flagship spread to other hegemony vessels. Through the microscopic debris that floated between ships during normal space combat, every tiny fragment of metal that broke away from the dying dreadnought carried millions of the invisible destroyers that Lieutenant Sam Parker watched his monitoring screens as the nanobots followed their mining algorithms throughout the enemy fleet. The machines had been programmed to identify and consume specific materials used in hegemony ship construction. They moved through space like an unstoppable plague that turned the most advanced warships in the old galaxy into clouds of recycled atoms. The second hegemony vessel to fall was a heavy cruiser that had been firing on a damaged council ship when nanobots from the flagship drifted into its weapon ports. The microscopic machines immediately began consuming the gun, barrels, and power conduits while reproducing at a rate that doubled their numbers every few minutes. Within an hour, the entire weapon system had been reduced to basic elements. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as red icons representing enemy ships began to change color and fade away. Each hegemony vessel that the nanobots reached became a factory for producing more of the tiny destroyers. The enemy fleet found itself fighting an opponent that could not be shot or blown up because it was too small to target and too distributed to destroy. The hegemony commanders tried everything they could think of to stop the spreading disaster. They fired their weapons at empty space, hoping to destroy nanobots that were invisible to their sensors. They activated their shields and defensive systems, but the microscopic machines simply passed through energy barriers like they were not even there. Some ships tried to jump to hyperspace, but the nanobots had already damaged their navigation systems beyond repair. Commander Lisa Hayes monitored communications from the enemy fleet as panic spread through their ranks. Hegemony officers were screaming orders in their harsh language while their ships dissolved around them. These were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed entire civilizations, but they had never faced an enemy that attacked. At the molecular level. One hegemony captain broadcast a desperate message asking what kind of weapon the humans had used and how it could be stopped. His ship was already half consumed by nanobots that were working their way through the hull like invisible termites eating through wood. Emergency lights flickered as power systems failed and crew members abandoned their posts to reach the escape. Pods. Jake opened a response channel and spoke in the calm voice of someone who had grown up fixing broken equipment in places where asking for help was not an option. He explained that the nanobots were not really weapons at all, but simple mining tools that humans used to break down asteroids and extract useful materials from worthless rock. The machines had been designed to work in the harshest environments imaginable, and nothing could stop them. Once they began their programmed task, the truth was even more terrifying for the hegemony fleet. Humans had not built these nanobots as instruments of war, but as everyday tools for survival in space. Every mining ship and construction crew used similar machines to do jobs that would take years to complete by hand. The galaxy was learning that human peaceful technology could be more dangerous than any military weapon. Sam Parker checked the status of his modified mining charges that were still loaded in the Defiance cargo bays. Each explosive device contained billions more nanobots, in dormant state, waiting to be activated by specific electromagnetic signatures. The machines could detect hegemony ship systems from hundreds of kilometers away and would wake up automatically when they sensed their programmed targets. The enemy fleet tried to retreat, but found that the nanobots had already damaged their engines and navigation computers. Ships that had been able to cross the galaxy in days were now drifting helplessly in space, while their crews watched everything they depended on simply cease to exist. A mighty hegemony armada was becoming a collection of lifeboats and emergency beacons. Admiral Zektar broadcast one final message before his flagship completely disintegrated around him. His voice was filled with rage and disbelief as he demanded to know how a primitive species like humanity could possess such devastating technology. He had studied human military capabilities for months and found nothing that could threaten his superior fleet. Jake smiled as he listened to the alien commander's fury and confusion. The hegemony had made the same mistake as every other species that encountered humans for the first time. They had looked at human technology and seen only simple tools and basic equipment. They never understood that humans built things to work under impossible conditions because their survival depended on it. The nanobots continued their relentless work throughout the enemy formation. Each consumed ship provided raw materials for billions more of the microscopic machines. The hegemony vessels that had looked so threatening just hours before were now nothing more than expanding clouds of processed matter drifting through space. Where a conquering armada had once threatened all sentient life, emergency pods launched from dying ships as hegemony crews abandoned their dissolving vessels. The aliens who had come to conquer Earth were now refugees begging for rescue from the very people they had planned to destroy. Their perfect formation had become a debris field of recycled atoms and electronic components, scattered across millions of cubic kilometers of space. The remaining Council ships watched in amazement as the most feared fleet in galactic history simply vanished before their eyes. 300 warships that could have destroyed entire star systems had been defeated by mining equipment operated by 43 humans in a ship that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The silence that followed the destruction of the hegemony armada was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. 300 of the most powerful warships ever built had been reduced to drifting clouds of recycled matter in less than 4 hours. The Galactic Council fleet that had been facing certain destruction now found themselves the victors of the most one-sided battle in recorded history. Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the Defiant, watching the alien ships slowly return to formation around his vessel. The same commanders who had mocked his rust bucket just hours before were now requesting permission to approach and offer their congratulations. Ships that had treated the human vessel like a flying piece of junk were lining up to escort the Defiant back to Council headquarters, the communications channel filled with messages from alien captains who wanted to understand how the humans had achieved such a complete victory. Zephyrian admirals spoke with voices full of respect as they asked about human military doctrine. Nexus Coalition scientists begged for technical specifications of the nanobots that had consumed an entire fleet. Every species in the council, suddenly, wanted to know everything about human technology. Commander Lisa Hayes processed dozens of requests for information while trying to maintain some kind of order on the communication frequencies. Alien military leaders who had barely acknowledged human existence were now offering alliance treaties and technology sharing agreements. The species that had given humanity the smallest possible fleet allocation were suddenly very interested in expanding human military capabilities. 3 days later, Jake found himself standing before the full Galactic Council assembly on their capital world of Nexus Prime. The massive chamber could hold representatives from over 1,000 different species, and every seat was filled for the emergency session. Alien beings of every size and shape imaginable listened as the human captain explained how his single ship had defeated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. The council chamber had been built to impress visitors with its size and grandeur. But Jake felt comfortable speaking to the assembled aliens. He had spent years explaining technical problems to mining crews and colony administrators who needed simple answers to complex questions. The political leaders of the galaxy were just another audience who wanted to understand how human ingenuity had saved their civilizations. Jake described how the nanobots had been developed for asteroid mining operations, where human workers needed to extract useful materials from worthless rock. The machines had been designed to operate in environments that would destroy conventional equipment while reproducing themselves using whatever raw materials they could find. They were tools for survival that had accidentally become the most effective weapon system ever deployed. Lieutenant Sam Parker had been invited to address the Council's scientific committee about the technical aspects of human engineering. The alien scientists could not understand how mining equipment had been weaponized so effectively. Sam explained that humans did not build their technology to look impressive, but to work under conditions where failure meant death for everyone involved. The mining nanobots represented decades of human experience, working in the harshest environments the galaxy could offer. They had been tested in solar forges and asteroid fields, where temperatures and radiation would destroy most known materials. The machines could adapt to any situation because human survival had depended on that adaptability for generations. Commander Lisa Hayes received offers from 12 different species to serve as their fleet tactical advisor. The aliens wanted to learn human military thinking and understand how such a small crew had defeated so many enemy ships. Lisa tried to explain that humans did not have special military secrets, but simply approached problems differently than other species. Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership status with equal representation in all galactic affairs. More importantly, they passed a resolution stating that no member species would ever again judge human capabilities based on the appearance of their technology. The galaxy had learned that looking primitive did not mean being primitive. Jake received a personal message from the Supreme Chancellor of the Council, thanking him for saving billions of lives throughout the galaxy. The hegemony had been planning to conquer every inhabited world and enslave or destroy all other species. The human victory had ended that threat permanently and guaranteed peace for generations to come. Defiant was offered a place of honor in the Council Fleet Museum, where future generations could learn about the ship that had changed galactic history. Jake politely declined the offer and requested permission to return the vessel to active patrol duty. The old cargo hauler still had work to do protecting human colonies and trade routes. 6 months later, the Defiant was back in space, doing the job she had always done best. The ship still looked like a rust bucket held together with spare parts and good intentions. Her hull was still stained and patched from years of hard service. Cables and pipes still ran along the outside, where they had been added over the decades. But now, when alien vessels encountered the battered human ship, they gave her a respectful distance and wondered what other surprises humanity might have hidden. in plain sight. The galaxy had learned that humans built their technology for function rather than appearance. Every piece of equipment had been designed to work when everything else had failed. Jake Morrison continued as captain of the ship that had saved the galaxy while keeping the same crew that had made victory possible. Sam Parker still hit the reactor, with a wrench twice a day to keep it running smoothly. Lisa Hayes still monitored alien communications and translated their respect into practical cooperation. The nanobots had been safely recovered and returned to their original purpose of mining asteroids and building space stations. The technology that had destroyed the hegemony Armada went back to helping humans survive in places where other species could not even visit. The tools of war became tools of construction once again. Earth received thousands of messages from grateful species throughout the galaxy, thanking humanity for their sacrifice and courage. But the humans who had made victory possible just went back to work doing what they had always done. They built things that worked and fixed problems that seemed impossible to solve, that the galaxy would never forget the day they learned to take humanity seriously. But humans had already moved on to the next challenge waiting among the stars.